This social media influencer showed off her cartel life on TikTok and bragged to the police about being untouchable. They proved her wrong in the most humiliating way. And this cartel mob boss mysteriously vanished out of nowhere after threatening the police. What happened to him will shock you. These are times when the cartel got humbled by the Mexican police. Starting with cartel suspects who thought they could talk their way out, the police showed them otherwise. In early 2024, a video began circulating online that would ignite debate across Mexico. It showed a tense moment in the state of Morelos, where local police confronted a group of suspected members of organized crime. The suspects appeared cornered, and according to some reports, even pleaded to surrender. Yet what followed has been described as one of the most controversial confrontations in recent memory. He fired his weapon and unalived the cartel members on scene to everyone's shocked dismay. This incident didn't come out of nowhere. Just a year earlier, the Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, often known by its initials CJNG, had announced its arrival in Morelos through a public manifesto. They declared their intention to take control of key territories, challenging both rival groups and local authorities. For communities already strained by years of conflict, this announcement brought fear of even more instability. So, when the confrontation happened in February 2024, it became more than just another exchange of fire between suspects and the police. Supporters of the officers argued that the force was necessary, pointing out that the suspects were heavily armed and posed an immediate threat. Others saw it differently, suggesting that what unfolded went beyond proper procedure and raised serious concerns about the rule of law. The fallout was immediate. Videos and images spread rapidly across social media, fueling speculation and anger. Human rights organizations demanded investigations, while some citizens praised the officers as protectors who were finally standing up to organized crime. The State Attorney General's office and other government agencies issued cautious statements, but the public remained divided. For Morelos, the incident highlighted a troubling reality. On one side, citizens demanded stronger action against organized groups that had long dominated their towns. On the other, questions about accountability and human rights hung in the air. The situation left many wondering. In the fight against cartels, how far is too far? But if you think that's dramatic, wait until you hear about the TikTok influencer who thought she was untouchable just because she had cartel protection. By 2022, the conflict between cartels and authorities wasn't just being fought on the streets, it was also unfolding on social media. One striking example was a young woman known online as Mixi Padilla. She wasn't just another influencer. Reports linked her to a local cell of the Gulf Cartel, one of Mexico's oldest organized crime groups. Mixi gained attention on TikTok by posting videos where she flaunted a lifestyle connected to organized crime. She sang along to popular narco ballads, wore tactical gear, and displayed symbols associated with her group. For some viewers, her content seemed almost surreal, a blend of entertainment and criminal identity. But beneath the surface, her presence revealed something deeper. The way social media had become a stage where organized groups tried to project power and recruit loyalty. That stage collapsed on March 30th, 2022. Mixi and several armed associates were traveling in northern Mexico when they were intercepted by military forces. What followed was an exchange of fire that turned a quiet street into a battleground. By the time it was over, Mixi and her partner, a figure identified as a regional leader within her group, were among those unalived. News of the incident spread quickly, not only because of the confrontation itself, but also because of Mixi's online persona. Images and details leaked across social platforms, sparking debates that went far beyond her role in organized crime. Some saw her story as a cautionary tale about the dangers of glamorizing this world online. Others pointed out the growing influence of social media, where young people were increasingly exposed to porn and sometimes enticed by this kind of content. Authorities remained cautious in their official statements, but the case underscored a new dimension of cartel activity: digital influence. For decades, these groups operated in secrecy, relying on intimidation and word of mouth. But in the modern era, platforms like TikTok and Instagram became powerful tools, allowing members to flaunt their lifestyles and reach audiences that traditional propaganda never could. The downfall of the so-called TikTok narco queen was more than just another headline. It reflected how the battle had shifted into cyberspace, where reputation, image, and perception could be just as dangerous as weapons on the ground. But as shocking as Mixi's story was, the next case would challenge public trust in an entirely different way, when special forces themselves were caught on camera during an operation that raised intense moral questions. In May 2023, an incident in Nuevo Laredo, a city near the US-Mexico border, sent shockwaves through the country. A group of special forces intercepted a vehicle carrying several armed men believed to be linked to organized crime. The confrontation ended quickly, with the suspects subdued and placed under custody. But what happened next became one of the most controversial moments in Mexico's recent history. Security camera footage later surfaced, showing details that contradicted official reports. According to the recording, some of the detainees were placed against a wall under heavy guard. Minutes later, shots were heard. When investigators pieced together the events, they alleged that at least some of the men had been unalived after they were no longer a threat. The release of this footage raised immediate concerns. Was this a legitimate response to an attempted escape, or was it an unlawful action carried out by the special forces? Official statements emphasized that the unit had come under fire and responded accordingly. But as the video spread, independent analysts and human rights organizations questioned that version of events. The public reaction was deeply divided. Some viewed the special forces as heroes who were finally taking strong action against criminal groups that had terrorized their communities. Others worried that crossing the line into unlawful actions only blurred the difference between the authorities and the groups they were fighting. This case highlighted a central dilemma in Mexico's struggle against organized crime. On one hand, communities demand firm protection from groups that have destabilized their regions for decades. On the other, respect for human rights and lawful process is essential for trust in institutions. When units are seen as stepping outside those boundaries, it undermines the very authority they are meant to uphold. The Nuevo Laredo case became a national conversation about accountability, transparency, and the fine line between justice and excess. But the strangest story of them all isn't about police. It's about one man, a hammer, and a legend the cartels will never forget. In 2015, whispers began to spread through northern Mexico about a man who operated outside the system. He wasn't a police officer anymore, nor a soldier bound by orders. He was a former Marine who became known by many names. El Marino Loco, the Crazy Marine, or, more famously, the Lord of the Hammer. His real name was reported as Eric Morales, a man once enlisted in the Mexican Navy, but his reputation came not from his service record, it came from what he did after. According to reports, Morales began targeting cartel members directly, using methods designed not only to intimidate, but also to strip them of the bravado they projected. He carried with him a small hammer, a simple, almost ordinary tool that became a symbol of his mission. Stories circulated that he would capture cartel affiliates and subject them to what was described as inhumane treatment. Rather than simply confronting them, he sought to humiliate them, sometimes forcing them into situations meant to undermine their tough image. Photos and accounts began surfacing online of cartel figures in compromised positions, their reputations shattered rather than their bodies alone harmed. For Morales, this wasn't random. In interviews, he claimed his goal was to break the psychological hold that these groups had over communities. He argued that cartel members often relied on a culture of fear and exaggerated masculinity, and by dismantling that image, he hoped to weaken their influence. Whether his approach worked in practice is still debated, but his legend grew rapidly. In one widely reported incident, Morales was credited with helping rescue a former U.S. Navy serviceman who had been kidnapped. In others, he allegedly stormed the homes of cartel leaders, disrupting their operations and spreading fear among those who had once thought themselves untouchable. But his rise also raised serious questions. Was Morales a hero, standing up to criminal groups where institutions had failed, or was he simply another figure taking justice into his own hands outside the boundaries of law? Even as some praised him for challenging cartels, others worried that his actions set a dangerous precedent, that vigilantism could replace legal order in places where trust in institutions had eroded. Eventually, Morales disappeared from the public eye. Some reports suggested he had been dismissed from military service for misconduct. Others speculated that he continued his activities in secret, possibly forming his own small group. Rumors even circulated of cartel members being found humiliated in ways that bore his signature, fueling the belief that the Lord of the Hammer was still active. His story remains a striking reminder of the blurred lines in Mexico's struggle against organized crime. When institutions falter and communities feel abandoned, figures like Morales can rise, symbols of both resistance and controversy. And while his whereabouts remain unknown, his legend lingers in conversations about Mexico's long battle with cartels. But the fight has not only been waged on the ground or through vigilante acts. In the modern era, an entirely new battlefield has emerged, one that exists not in streets or safe houses, but online. In the past, organized crime groups relied on secrecy, coded messages, and local intimidation to maintain power. But today, a new battlefield has emerged: the digital world. Social media platforms, once thought of only as tools for entertainment and communication, have become a stage for cartels to project influence, recruit followers, and even taunt rivals. This shift became clear in the late 2010s and early 2020s. Platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook began to see the appearance of videos and images linked to cartel members. Some posts showed convoys of vehicles, Others displayed expensive lifestyles, while still others leaned into music and culture to send coded messages. The goal was rarely just to entertain, it was to send a message of presence, dominance, and power. Authorities quickly realized the danger of this digital presence. For younger audiences, these clips often blurred the line between reality and spectacle. What might look like just another flashy video was, in fact, propaganda designed to make cartel life appear glamorous or unstoppable. Experts warned that this form of digital storytelling could be more effective than traditional recruitment tactics, pulling vulnerable young people into a world far more dangerous than it appeared on screen. At the same time, governments and social media companies face the challenge of how to respond. On one hand, platforms are global, and content spreads quickly, making it difficult to regulate in real time. On the other, removing content can sometimes drive it further underground, where it circulates without oversight. Mexico's government has pressured platforms to act, but the problem persists. Organized groups have found in digital spaces a way to broadcast their image to millions, often without facing immediate consequences. The rise of digital cartel wars reflects a troubling trend. The conflict is no longer confined to physical territory. It now extends into cyberspace, where perception and reputation are as powerful as weapons. A single viral video can influence how communities see these groups, fueling fear or fascination. For citizens, the danger is not just in the streets, but also in the feeds they scroll through daily. And as technology evolves, so too does the battle for influence, proving that the fight against organized crime is no longer just about borders, but about narratives. But while the digital battlefield is new, the consequences ripple outward, touching even international relations and cross-border policies. And that brings us to another layer of this ongoing struggle, the global dimension of the fight. The story of Mexico's cartels cannot be told in isolation. Their reach extends far beyond national borders, shaping international security efforts and even global markets. Nowhere is this more visible than in the relationship between Mexico and the United States. For decades, U.S. authorities have identified Mexican cartels as the primary suppliers of substances entering American markets. From white powder in the 1980s to crystal and party pills in the 1990s and 2000s, and more recently synthetic opioids such as the flow of narcotics has had a devastating impact on communities in both countries. This demand and supply chain has tied the two nations together in a cycle of enforcement, prevention, and tragedy. Cross-border cooperation has been a constant, though often complicated feature of this relationship. Joint task forces, intelligence sharing, and security initiatives have been launched repeatedly to curb trafficking routes. Yet despite billions invested, cartels have adapted quickly, using tunnels, drones, and increasingly digital communications to stay ahead of authorities. Beyond the US-Mexico connection, cartels have established international networks stretching into Central America, South America, and even Europe. These links provide them with access to supply lines and financial channels that make them difficult to dismantle. The global reach also complicates enforcement. Actions taken in one country can quickly affect markets and security situations thousands of miles away. The international implications are clear. Cartels are not simply a local issue. They represent a transnational challenge with economic and humanitarian consequences. What happens in Mexican border towns reverberates in US cities. What happens on shipping routes in the Pacific can influence European markets. And every move to disrupt these networks reshapes the global landscape. But beyond international activity, there is another group at the heart of this story: the everyday people living in regions where these conflicts unfold. Their experiences reveal the human cost behind the headlines. Behind every headline about cartels, police, or military operations lies a quieter reality: the lives of ordinary people who find themselves caught between opposing forces. For many communities in Mexico, conflict is not an abstract concept. It is a daily concern that shapes how families live, work, and even move from one place to another. In towns where organized groups exert influence, residents often face impossible choices. Some are pressured into cooperation, whether through extortion or fear, while others live under constant uncertainty about when the next exchange of fire might erupt nearby. Markets, schools, and public events can all be disrupted at a moment's notice, leaving communities in a state of prolonged anxiety. Displacement is another lasting effect. Entire families have been forced to leave their homes, not because of natural disasters, but because of threats from armed groups or the risks of living in contested territories. In many cases, they resettle in larger cities or even cross borders in search of safety. joining the flow of migration that stretches far beyond Mexico's borders. And yet, even under these pressures, stories of resilience emerge. Community organizations, religious groups, and local leaders often step forward to provide aid, create safe spaces, or simply offer hope. In some towns, citizens have organized neighborhood watches or informal networks of communication to protect one another. These actions do not erase the larger conflict, but they demonstrate the determination of ordinary people to maintain dignity and stability in the face of uncertainty. The economic impact is also profound. Local businesses often suffer as extortion reduces profits or forces closures. Tourism, once a source of income in many regions, can vanish almost overnight if an incident draws international attention. Over time, these pressures weaken entire economies, making it harder for families to find stable futures and easier for organized groups to exploit vulnerability. When discussing cartels, police, or soldiers, it is easy to focus on the dramatic confrontations, but it is the day-to-day reality of ordinary citizens, parents, children, shopkeepers, students that truly shows the cost of this ongoing struggle. Their stories remind us that the conflict is not just about power or territory, it is about the countless lives shaped, disrupted, and sometimes uprooted by forces beyond their control. And as we reflect on these human experiences, one question becomes harder to ignore. If the fight has gone on for decades, and if both official forces and criminal groups continue to clash, what does justice actually look like in the end? Across these stories, from controversial police operations in Morelos, to the downfall of a social media figure, to soldiers under scrutiny, and even the vigilante known as the Lord of the Hammer, one pattern becomes clear. The conflict between cartels and authority is not a simple story of good versus evil. It is a struggle shaped by fear, power, and survival, with consequences that ripple far beyond the immediate moments of confrontation. Each case forces society to ask difficult questions. When authorities act decisively, are they protecting communities or risking abuse of power? When individuals rise up outside the law, are they defenders of justice? Or do they risk becoming another source of instability? And when social media turns criminal figures into viral personalities, what responsibility do platforms and audiences bear in shaping perception? For ordinary people, these questions are not just theoretical. They define daily life. Families, businesses, and entire towns feel the impact of this ongoing conflict, whether through economic hardship, displacement, or the constant uncertainty of what might happen next. Internationally, the struggle reverberates through diplomacy, trade, and security. It is a reminder that organized crime is not confined to borders, and that no single solution will resolve such a deeply rooted issue. So where does this leave us? Perhaps the most important takeaway is not about the dramatic moments themselves, but about what they reveal. These stories show us that fighting fire with fire may bring short-term victories, but lasting peace requires something more: accountability, reform, and above all, attention to the people most affected. The question that remains is one only society can answer. In the pursuit of justice, how do we ensure that the methods used do not repeat the very patterns we hope to end?